interview with Peter Brown, co-author of Make It Stick, we talk about what is a better alternative to role play to prepare yourself for an important sales meeting. We also discuss how you can use reflection in your day to learn a lot faster. I know in your book, Make to Stick, you talk about how do you develop your mental models so that you can retrieve them. So say you run into a prospect that wants you to be the expert and you know what you want to convey so that they truly believe you're an expert at that point. Can you talk about how do you build the mental model so that you can retrieve what you need when you need it?
Yeah. Think of yourself as a football quarterback, and you're getting ready to go into Saturday's game. Between now and Saturday, you're looking at the opposition, you're looking at their game, you're learning what you can about them, and you imagine yourself on the field and what their adjustments are to your plays and what your adjustments are going to be. If they do this, I'm going to do that. If they do this other thing, I'm going to do something else. And you rehearse that with your teammates, and you rehearse it mentally. So you can say these are like half a dozen critical possibilities, and I am envisioning myself responding to each one in a little different way. And if I'm working with a team, if I'm working with my colleagues at work on this possibility, we're talking that through and walking it through. So I think a big part of a mental model is it's mental rehearsal. It's imagining a scenario and walking yourself through that scenario so that when you are there with your client in the situation, in the fray, that possibility that you've imagined, you're prepared for.
Okay. Now, I have to say, most sales reps that I meet hate role playing, and that tends to be built into any type of learning that they do, especially classroom learning. So when you say imagine and mentally envision yourself doing it, can you get out of actually role playing, or what role does role playing need to play in order for you to be effective in really adapting what it is you're learning?
Okay, well, the purpose of role play is reflects sort of a truism, and that is that in training, the more the experience of the training reflects the real world in which you're going to have to call up on knowledge or skill, the more beneficial that training will be. So we turn to role play because you be the customer, I'll be the salesperson. You know, you press for this or that, I'll respond, and then we'll switch, and I'll be the customer, the prospect. And in doing that, we can replicate or simulate, if you will, a real world situation. If you think of pilots learning how to deal with emergencies in the air, they sit in flight simulators and encounter unexpected problems, and then they practice responding to those. That's a form of role play. Role play is very powerful, but you don't necessarily have to do it with somebody. I remember when I was interviewing Vince Dooley for this book. Vince was the famed coach for the University of Georgia Bulldog football team, just an incredible win-loss record. And I asked him about the football players and his teams learning the playbook and practicing the playbook, and also getting to Saturday's game. And a lot of what I just described, this notion in the playbook of making the motions of going through the play in your head and maybe a little bit physically, is a form of role play that is effective for learning. The scientists that I worked with in writing this book said mental rehearsal can be as powerful as actually physically going through a process.
That's good news.
Yeah. So it is good news. The key is you're always looking for a situation in your practice regime that is similar to the real world environment in which you're going to be tested, if you will, asked to call up those skills and that knowledge.
So the mental role play is something that somebody can build in on their way to a sales meeting.
Well, exactly, right. Yeah. I mean, I used to do that in my consulting business. I'm going to facilitate a group discussion with a senior management team, and I'm quizzing myself on the names of the people who are going to be in that meeting and something about them. And then I'm quizzing myself about the directions that the meeting might take and how I would respond to that. Exactly. That's a form of mental rehearsal. Very
Okay.
powerful.
No, I love the different learning styles that you addressed in the book and the fact that some people just learn better through stories, which I think is true for a lot of adults. Probably majority of people learn best through stories. And I liked the concept that you can distill out the principles by looking at several stories at once. Can you talk more about that?
If you look at yourself and the series of experiences you've had in sales or different fields, a really important thing is to reflect on what you might have learned in an experience. Some of the people I interviewed in writing this book who were really incredible, capable learners, neurosurgeon at the Mayo Clinic, cops, pilots, various people who have to be on top of complex knowledge and skills, have had a habit of reflecting after an experience on how it went and what you might have learned from that experience. So one of the people I profiled is an investor named Bruce Hendry, who set out as a kid. He wanted to he wanted to make a lot of money, and so he started out by hitchhiking to South Dakota from Minneapolis to fill an empty suitcase with fireworks and bring them back and sell them to his friends. Then he learned, wow, there's such a thing as supply and demand. So that was an important lesson for him. And he went through a series of ventures, if you will. He went into the stock market, and he discovered from being in the stock market, gee, you can lose money pretty fast in the stock market, and it's hard to make it back. If you lose 50%, you got to make back 100%. Well, that's a lesson. So he had this habit of engaging in experiences and then reflecting on what the lesson was and going on to find the next kind of venture or experience that he wanted to have that would build a base of knowledge and a mental model, if you will, for taking risks, sizing up the risk, and moving forward so that he could really minimize the downside and optimize the upside. It's a great chapter, I think, because it shows this person over the vector of a few decades and how these individual experiences, because he could remember them, talk about them, and the lessons from them, built a mental model for investing that has proved very successful for him. And I think we could do that in any field. I
Yeah.
mean,
And I would say to some extent, people are doing that, whether they're realizing to leverage it or not is another thing.
right. And the leveraging involves reflection, uh, uh, drawing some conclusions, and then taking the next step. Yeah, I had an opportunity in talking to the head of pediatric neurosurgery at the Washington University in St. Louis at the medical school. It was revamping the way they teach pediatric neurosurgery. And he said, some people seem to be better at learning from experience than other people. And it seems to be that reflection plays a part in that learning. So he was building into the curriculum actual periods of reflection for the students after they'd done some operation or different applying a medical intervention, spending time reflecting on how that went, how it could have gone better, what they might do next time. So that's a skill that we all need to develop in order to keep building on those experiences instead of repeating them.
Okay. And I like the what you covered there. So for a post-sales call review, for instance, reflecting on the points you mentioned rather than just beating yourself up through the whole review.
Exactly. One of the things I didn't mention at the beginning when I talked about what the science of successful learning, it turns out that a powerful way to learn is what the scientists call generation. That is trying to solve a problem before being taught how. Well, we're all doing that in life. From the moment we try to stand up from being on all fours, we're trying to solve a problem. And the thing about generation is, and this is true in sales and in business, when you set out to do something, uh, and that experience succeeds or fails, the important part for learning is getting corrective feedback when you make mistakes. So if you're in a training situation, uh, your trainer can give you corrective feedback, but somehow you've got to look for that corrective feedback on your own. If you're out engaging in sales experience, sometimes you might be able to ask a prospect, what was it about this that didn't go right for you? Or you might also, as a sales rep, you're kind of the eyes and ears for the company out in the marketplace. You might discover, I need to go back and inform the people back in the office that what we've got needs to be tweaked a little bit in order to really meet the customer's needs. But this idea of corrective feedback is an important element in learning from doing.
Okay, that makes sense. So you've talked a little bit about self-testing, so that you know that you truly learned something. And I'm curious if you've got ideas how a sales professional could take advantage of this, because, they're living their professional life outside of a classroom, and the goal isn't to get the A on the test. The goal is to actually implement what you learned effectively. So, is there a way that the self-testing concept translates into actually doing what you learned?
Well, there's a couple ways. One way is that um, if you're trying to learn the features, with the product line and the features of it and so forth, and how it compares to the competition, some of those fundamentals you need to go out into the marketplace and be successful, you could test yourself by quizzing yourself. I mean, uh, you could sit down with a piece of paper and you could say, challenge yourself to list the top products and what the big challenges with each of those products in terms of making that sale, and how you are going to work with that challenge to overcome it. Other ways are there's host of recently of new software apps that are available, in which you can actually construct little quizzes like flashcards if it's particular things you're trying to memorize or learn.
Okay.
If you go to Wikipedia, there's and Google spaced repetition, and go to the bottom of the Wikipedia listing. They list maybe half a dozen, but they list a link to many, many more things like Anki and Quizlet.com and different apps where you can actually build a platform that will send you questions periodically to your smartphone and keep you on your toes on particulars that you want to make sure you're in command of.
I like that that's a random test. So, yeah, it catches you by surprise and it really forces the recall.
Right. Mixing it up and spacing it out in terms of that recall are really key for mastery.
Excellent. Well, Peter, do you have any last words of wisdom for our audience of sales professionals on how they can learn smarter?
I would say you learn from your customers too. I think that in sales, you're out there to help your customers succeed, and if wherever you have the opportunity to find out from the customer how they need help in order to be more successful in their field and what you can contribute to that, the more able you are, A, to speak to prospects of the future, but also to enliven and recharge your organization to expand what it offers and be even a stronger partner with your customer. So that notion of attitude of I am the customer, I am the company, I'm both, I'm right there in the middle of it, gives you a lot of power and a lot of potential to grow a successful business and help your client grow a successful business. I discovered in consulting it was a lot better to work with successful organizations than organizations in trouble, because you can become a part of that success. And I think that's the way to do it, is to see yourself as both the customer and the company.
Thanks so much, Peter, for your contribution to helping us all get a lot smarter with our learning. Sales Mastery is your resource to make it easy to accelerate your sales learning. Make sure to connect. Find out about new interviews first by subscribing to our YouTube channel right here. And get more resources to help you master selling by clicking here. I wish you the best of success.